We're live.
We're live. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Hey, y'all. What's going on? This is Naim and Oscar from the No Nonsense podcast. I'm your host with our co-host here, Oscar Montiel. Today is August 18th. No, it's July 11th. It's July 11th. Sorry about that. 2020 on a Saturday. How are you, Oscar?
I'm good. How are you, Naim?
Very well, thank you, thank you. So we have quite a special guest today, and a good friend of ours and a friend of the show, Miss Mausam Mehta. How are you, Mausam?
Good, how are you? Well, I guess you already
Very
said
well.
how you were, so.
So Mausam is a third-year student at the University of Virginia, entering the McIntyre School of Business. So business. Are you eventually going to go for your MBA?
Potentially. I guess it depends on where my job lands me.
And outside of all your academic excellence, you are the secretary of the National Association of Blind Students, as well as a leader here in the National Federation of the Blind of Virginia affiliate. We will talk a little bit more about the student division and the National Federation of the Blind throughout this episode, but I suppose I'll hand it over to Mausam to introduce herself.
Sure, thank you, Naeem. That was a really good introduction. I can't say I have much to add, but I'm really, really excited to be here with you guys. And I'm looking forward to a very open and honest conversation about blindness and also just kind of life right now. It's definitely an interesting time. So,
Hasn't it been crazy? So how has everyone been holding up through COVID? Any COVID highlights from either of the two of you?
oh gosh, highlights.
Mausam, you can go first, and then I can talk about what I've been through so far.
Oh my gosh, I feel like that's actually an honor, but I have nothing exciting to report. I mean, I guess highlights would be that I am doing well. Thankfully, I am safe. My family is safe. I think right now that is one of the best things we can hope for. I think that a lot of our life plans and goals and things we were really trying to go after have definitely been put a bit on the wayside, but I think that it's definitely given us an opportunity to learn and to be flexible. And while it is a bummer on lots of levels, I think we are definitely going to try to find new ways to move forward through this very strange time. So,
Yeah. So I don't know if it's because, it coincidentally happened right, like during COVID, I guess. So our house somehow got flooded.
oh
Don't ask
no.
me how. I don't know. All I know is I was awakened at like 6:30 in the morning by my mom saying, "Hey, try to get a hold of your sister or someone to help us out because our house is being flooded." And I honestly thought, I'm like, oh man, it's the basement again, because our basement's been flooded before. But then I came downstairs and I saw them. I saw like my grandma and all of them like cleaning like the living room area, the dining room area. I was like, oh, okay, this is different. And then it turns out that like the whole entire basement and the living room and the dining room and parts of the laundry room and kitchen were flooded. So I was like, oh man. So we were stuck with reconstruction projects or remodeling projects for a good 2 months. So
Oh geez. Well, that's a way to stay busy, I guess.
yeah.
Well, I know for me, and I think we got a notification either someone had joined or something like that. So if someone had joined, feel free to participate. We're talking about our COVID-19 highlights, if we can put it that way. For me, it's been a few things. First and foremost, the ability, I admittedly should work harder, but the ability to take the opportunity to connect with family members and loved ones better. You know, it's funny because you think when you live in a house with folks that you know them up and down, but you realize that we all get caught up in our distractions in our life, our day-to-day activities, our phones, our YouTube feeds. and just anything that the internet has put out there to distract us. So, I've been trying to work on that. There's much more that can be done there. Ramadan, which is a holy month of fasting for those who observe the Islamic faith. I'm of the Muslim faith background. Was quite different this year. Typically, it consists of invitations and feasts and all the different families getting together. You'd have invitations of 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 90, and everyone would get together. Obviously, this could not be the case this year with the COVID-19 pandemic, but we, as a family, work together in putting together all kinds of delicious meals. And it's enough that there were so many quarantine recipe video blogs, I think is what they call them. And TikTok became a big thing, and all that happened around the same time. So we were trying all kinds of different recipes and dusting off the cookbooks, if you will. So there's been that. And I think also for me, this podcast, I don't know that this podcast would have come about in any other environment, being so busy, so caught up in the day to day. It's been a talking point between Oscar and I for a little while now. I'd say a year, give or take. Oh, no,
it's been a little over a month since we started.
Oh, yeah, since we started, it's been a little over a month, but we've been talking about it for like a year. Oh, we should get a podcast started. Oh, we should talk, and you just never get to it. So that kind of came about. I think COVID-19, we can agree, has either been an opportunity for folks to be more productive or less productive, depending on how you take the steering wheel. So those have pretty much been my highlights in terms of COVID-19. So online schooling. I know you're a student at the University of Virginia, Mausam. How has that looked? Has that looked as accessible as in-person classes and in-person studying?
Oh my gosh, that's a good one. So I think from the outset, it was inherently more difficult because it was mid-semester, right? One minute we were sitting in lecture halls, going to office hours. The disability office was just down the block, and then suddenly we were packing up, going home, and everything was based on your PC and your internet connection. I had a pretty terrible internet connection. I still kind of do, but that caused just problems naturally with the Zoom connection and with just keeping up with the high workloads, and the websites and all the servers were crashing, right? Because everybody is on the same website and like learning system. And so I think in that sense, it was inaccessible, but due to extraneous factors that were out of everybody's control. But I guess from a blindness perspective, it wasn't too bad, simply because a lot of the class routines had already been established, and a lot of my classes that I took last semester were pretty text-based, and the class that was a disaster in itself, which was managerial accounting, was already online. So that wasn't necessarily a pandemic accessibility issue. It was just a systemic accessibility issue. And so I guess with that being said, it was difficult at times, inaccessible, but overall manageable given the circumstances and the fact that there was really no other choice.
Naim, Oscar, I know you are doing a certification program, sort of one of those boutique programs to fast track into a career in cybersecurity. So that has always been online for you, right? So did the face of your workload or accessing your work change in any way, or was that primarily as it was pre-COVID?
Naim, I think you lost connection. Naim, I think you lost connection, so I wasn't able to understand what you said.
Okay, can I be heard now?
Yeah, now you sound good. Yeah.
Okay. Oscar, I know you were taking a certification program, sort of one of those boutique fast track into cybersecurity careers type programs. And I guess my question is, has the face of your learning changed in any way due to COVID, or has it not? Because you've always been doing it remotely. Correct me if I'm wrong.
So I've always been doing it remotely. However, I the exams and stuff like that are done at a testing center location. So when I was trying to get the information I needed to, sign up for the exam, I think COVID, the stay-at-home order was put in place literally like a week after I requested that information, and the company that I for the school that I was enrolled in to get those certs didn't get back to me until like a month into the stay-at-home order. So they say, until testing centers open up, we're not taking exams and stuff like that right now. But I heard that there was an online way of doing the exam. I just haven't progressed far enough in my studies, just from what they told me. They told me to study a little bit more, and who knows. I know now with stage 3 or 4 wherever we're at right now. I don't know if the testing centers are open up again. I should double check that whenever I get an opportunity. Naim, how has your learning been affected with COVID? I know that some of your courses were online, but some of them were also in person, and I know that one of the classes was just very, very hard for you, even with it being in person.
Yes, indeed. So I had multiple courses that I enrolled in that were initially online, while others were in person from the beginning but had to move online. And I think the highlight for me was the in-person class I was taking was a statistics course, Math 245 at Northern Virginia Community College, just about ready to earn my associate's degree, but I had to get this class out of the way amongst one other 3-credit course that I will get it out of the way in the fall, hopefully. But this statistics course was, a statistics course, and the software we were using was not the most accessible to begin with. I was working closely with the professor to coordinate, see if we can use another software. I think I was also having, on a personal note, some difficulty comprehending some of the concepts, just because mathematical based concepts have never really been my strong suit. I do really good at basic algebra, but past that, I might as well have a bowl of porridge and go home. But in the regard of this particular class, it had seemed to have, I had expected it to get harder shifting online. However, funny enough, since I had more resources available to me and having had it online and not constrained by the time limits that were put forth pre it being online, meaning instead of having to complete stuff in one day, you have the week to complete the whole week's course load, if that makes any sense. So it gave me more time to practice, more time to review. I had an opportunity to sit down and study more. So conceptually, I was able to grasp better having it shifted online. I think my work ethic went up because I'm more motivated to work from home than to show up in person. Just on a personal note. So my work ethic did go up, I believe, and ultimately, if I do say so myself, I earned an A in that course, but after much struggle. So I think the take-home lesson that I had to get was, you're always going to be given a situation. You can decide if you want to make it complicated for yourself or if you want to problem solve. And I had no choice but to problem solve because it was this way or the highway. So I had to problem solve. And although the incoming results took some time, the first 8 to 10 weeks of the course was like walking through a jungle of weeds. But once I got to a point where, the clearing was visible to me, I was able to proceed at an accelerated rate. And of course, I had to take advantage of tutoring resources, and I also coordinated with, friends and family who understand the concepts of statistics a little better than me. And, things came together eventually. So that was my biggest highlight. All my other courses were online at the time. So I don't think there was much of a shift, except that instead of exams being taken in person, they had to switch to an online platform, which would lock your computer. I can't remember the name of this system, but it would lock your computer, and as a result, it would lock your screen. So when it locks your screen, so you can't cheat and access other documents, it would lock my JAWS, my screen reader. So everything would shut down and become disabled, and then I'd have difficulty taking the exam. So I had to coordinate with an online reader scribe to take the exam because it just wouldn't work. It would shut down JAWS. So that was the only barrier I ran into, really.
Hey, Naim, this is Had.
Hi, how are you?
Good. So I just wanted to jump into this discussion. I was actually a senior this year at George Washington University. I was a double major, and I guess I could speak from my perspective as a graduating senior. Um, Not just any kind of senior, not any basic kind of senior, but actually a super senior. I do feel like the end to our school year was obviously very abrupt for most of us. And in March, it was like a time where I was looking forward to, a traditional graduation and the ceremonies and the end of the year parties, etc. But, once everything was halted, it was a major, surprise to me ultimately. However, there are some good things that I did have to look forward to, obviously, as, having more time. I was a commuter, so I had more time to, just ultimately focus on my studies rather than spending hours commuting into the city, spending time on campus rather than just going back home for like that hour between classes, and ultimately just getting more time to focus on my classes that were ultimately spent just doing other activities outside of the class. And then, uh, ultimately, I know it's all about the graduation. It was stopped abruptly, for me as a senior and all. But I guess those were just some things have even more down in my education. Um, um, I get to that point I feel ready to education. Um, and yeah.
So, I understand that, and thank you for joining us, Haras. Haras, my sister and friend and confidant to a degree. And I hadn't, admittedly realized the importance of, wrapping up your senior year of college, the capstone projects, the capstone research, all that kind of good stuff, and the finality, the graduation itself, and how that has impacted so many folks. I also know it impacted seniors in high school. And then with this situation being predominantly a medical, public health and medical crisis, I had even heard, and I don't know if anyone is aware of this and can comment on this. I have heard that there were folks who were pretty much wrapping up their medical school tenure, or I'm not exactly sure how all that works, but they eventually were admitted, into the field because they were needed in this public health catastrophe. So I don't know if there's anyone who wants to drop input on that. Correct me if I'm wrong, of course, or otherwise.
Naim, before anyone responds, I'll be right back. I just have to go do something real quick. But
Okay, for sure.
I'll be right back.
We'll hold up the fort. We'll hold up the fort.
So I think I could try and answer that question. I was a pre-med major. I was I was double majoring in both cognitive neuroscience and general biology for undergrad. Can you just clarify in your question?
So, at what stage were the folks in their studies when they were ultimately fast tracked? I don't want to use the word fast track because it sounds like they, obviously they earned it in their merits and they probably just had like a month or more of their residency left, or I don't know how that stuff works. But at what point in their studies were they for them to have been, admitted and licensed and all that stuff a couple months earlier than they otherwise would have? Because this became like a big news sensation for a couple days, and there was like debate whether that should have happened or shouldn't have happened, and then it sort of fell off the grid. So I assumed that it was okay.
So I could speak probably from two perspectives. I am, like I said, I was a pre-med major, and so I was doing an internship at Children's Hospital over in Washington, D.C., and that consisted of clinical research in neurogenetics. And from that perspective, I know the residents that I work with, their schedules ultimately changed. It was more rigorous, more demanding than it already is. um, and I know also from another perspective of mine as an EMT, a volunteer EMT at my local fire station, um, that it was kind of, I mean, I guess as an EMT, I do volunteer. I'm not a career paramedic here in my county, so I'm not paid to do it. I do volunteer. Furthermore, I'm not all, I do have to fulfill a certain amount of hours in order to fulfill my duties as an EMT in my station. However, those hours that I do put forth are not necessarily, as demanding as it would be for somebody who obviously has this as a career, right? So, I know as a volunteer EMT, I was very split. I was very uneasy about going into the fire station and carrying out my duties as an EMT during this whole situation. But at the same time, I wasn't really, um, you know, wanting to go into the fire station at the time because I was also concerned about, who I'm living with. I do live in a household with other people, and, I was just very worried and concerned about, being exposed to that in the fire station and coming home. A lot of this COVID situation, a lot of people were not only worried about themselves, but they were also worried about their loved ones, the people they were living with, the people they come into contact with, etc. Right? So, I know my role as an EMT was not as demanding, but and they did decrease the amount of shifts for volunteers, but just because they didn't want too much exposure um to whatever they could get exposed to at the station, at the hospital, at the emergency department. And so shifts were decreased, but at the same time, you also do feel like you have a duty, to fulfill. And that was a very confusing time for me at the moment.
I think there was so much that went into all the decision-making process for everyone during this time period. I know public health officials had to figure out what message they needed to put out to the people. The science and the research was still coming out and is still coming out. Every day we're finding out something new about this virus. And, sometimes what we find out yesterday turns out to be false today or vice versa. So, it's always changing and it's hard to keep up with everything. And then we have, everyone speaking from their point of view and from their expertise. You have economists saying, hey, we have to open up the economy. You have medical experts saying, well, that's not safe given the current pandemic situation, and then you have some celebrities, in some cases even celebrity doctors, if we can call them that, but folks who are medical doctors, but they're also in their own right celebrities, who are sort of pushed into this corner to comment, and then you have controversy surrounding every comment. Is that just natural given a pandemic situation, or is that just our hypersensitized culture these days?
That's a good question. I think it's hard to say for sure, because naturally, whenever something happens, no matter what the magnitude, whether it's a small thing or a big thing, everyone has their own opinions on it. I remember at the beginning of the conversation, you and I were just talking about how we finally have this one thing, this one common thing that unites every person around the world, right? And it is a tragedy, and it's unfortunate, and it's terrifying in a lot of situations that we are all dealing with this pandemic, and it's affecting all of our lives in so many ways. But even with that, it creates so many divides. And I think what's difficult is just trying to sort through all of that information, trying to sort through all the opinions, and kind of knowing which direction you are looking in, which direction you want to take your own life, and those who are close to you, like, how you impact their lives. And so I think in that sense, right now, I think the challenges are increased tenfold because everybody has such a different perspective, and a lot of these perspectives have merit in their own way, right? Because again, everyone is dealing with such a different situation that it's not one size fits all, but we are all kind of striving for that common ground, and we're trying to do as much good as we can, but that comes in so many shapes and forms, and sometimes it's hard to know where to look.
I think it's going to be very hard to issue a second stay-at-home order if and when a second wave hits, or now in the Sun Belt states, Florida, Texas, Arizona, California, where a second, or a surge in the first wave, I don't know that they're even terming this the second wave, I don't think they are, hit. I don't think it's going to be as easy to issue a second stay-at-home order, because folks are already in a situation where economically most people suffered, most people lost, most people experienced hardships as a result of the first shutdown, the first lockdown. Politics aside, the guys at the top, the federal government, didn't do enough to assist folks. Some people got their stimulus checks, some people didn't, some people are waiting, some people are in the queue for unemployment insurance. And, that's a big mess of its own. And then on the other hand, it's been 4 months. And I know we have to be patient, but some folks are saying it's been 4 months. Why don't we have enough answers on this virus yet? And people want to point fingers at our leaders, at our public health experts, at our medical experts. And I don't know that we could necessarily, you raise a good point, Mausam, I don't know that we can necessarily point fingers at any individual sector of experts. I think the point of the matter is every expert is analyzing it from their point of view and their point of expertise. Of course, economists need the economy to be open, right? And of course, the medical experts encourage quarantine and self-isolation to reduce the contagiousness, effectiveness of this virus, or having it spread. I don't know that it would impact the contagiousness, but it just won't spread to as many people and infect as many people. So, everyone has their point of view, and there's a certain level of correctness to their point of view. But I think, and we see, although this is a uniting global situation, this is also, unfortunately, in ways, dividing, because every country is handling it differently, and every country wants to say they handled it the best way possible. And you had Sweden, who had never even shut down anything, and some folks are giving them slack for that, because there was a high death rate. Other folks are saying, well, their economy didn't contract as bad as other nations, so they dodged the bullet in that regard. Mausam and Oscar, I know both of you guys and myself are blind. I don't know. I know everyone has a different form of identity. I don't want to say the word blind. So if any of you guys want to dispute that, feel free. How has COVID affected the blind people, or has it affected them more or less? Like going out to restaurants and stuff like that.
I would absolutely say that I think it depends. I think it depends on circumstance. I think one fear that I have, and I think many of us will continue to have, is really trying to work through the idea of social distancing when it's hard to judge distance, and be able to see the markers on the floor. I know that for a lot of predominantly cane users, if you put your cane out, if you extend your arm and your cane is out, it's generally around 6 feet, so that should do it. But I am a primary dog user, and so our dogs are not taught how to social distance. They don't know that you're supposed to keep 6 feet apart. They are trained to stand at the end of a line. They're trained to squeeze through crowds in tight spaces, and so that's just going to be something that's a work in progress. That's something I think is going to take a lot of patience from both sides, right? I think our instinct often to get really defensive, to get really upset, especially when, well-meaning people in the public might get upset and they'd be like, you're not following social distancing mandates. And, I think it's so easy to be like, well, I'm sorry, I can't see, it's not my fault. But I think we all have to take so much responsibility in this time. And I think we just need to give each other a lot of grace, because there are a lot of things that are going to be so much more difficult now. Social distancing is definitely a big one, but even just kind of moving around in the public, having access to delivery services, because, now everything is very, very reliant on pickup and delivery. And I guess the one other thing that just occurred to me now that's also really important is rideshare services and public transportation. That one's just really hard no matter which way you spin it. I think that in bigger cities, transit is still functioning because more than blind people use it and rely upon it. But again, there's so many measures put into place for everybody's safety that we all just need to be aware of. Unfortunately, in places where there isn't as much public transportation and rideshare has been limited, and you might not have somebody who can drive you places, it's hard. It's hard. You really have to try to figure out and plan what the best way is to get around, because if there's no rideshare and there's no transportation and there's nobody available to get you where you need to go, you have to be flexible. And I think that in itself causes a challenge, but I think they're definitely things that many of us share, so it's a little easier to find common ground there.
Without a doubt, I'm not even beginning to consider taking an Uber wherever I need to go.
Naim,
I personally,
Naim, if you don't mind,
go ahead, Oscar, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with what Mausam just said. Because public transportation, like over here, I remember, Naim, where like whenever I would come up to your area, I would say, hey, I'm gonna take the bus up there and be there like within maybe an hour. But now with COVID, you don't know who's been on that bus that may or may not have that virus. So that's precaution, along with Uber and Lyft as well. You don't know who's been in that car. So I remember, and also in different spots too, because I think Mausam and I were discussing this off air. I used to go do the grocery shopping for my family. Get a customer service representative at the store. But now with COVID, you'd rather not, go to a grocery store yourself. There's also, there's different apps like Instacart and stuff like that. But, I personally, it's gotten to me because I also viewed, the grocery store as a chance to, get away from home type thing. But now, using public transit and, other people's car, you just don't know, and you'd rather not take the risk.
Right.
It's really hard because we all have to also keep in mind our loved ones, our family members, those who we make contact with. Because, look, even if we are, you know, healthy and hopefully able to fight through this, who knows who we can spread it to and whether they can fight through it as well as we can. You know, we've been hearing some reports of people who have been saying they were in pretty much optimal health or perfect health, and they still suffered greatly. Some folks, I think a gentleman in I think it was Houston, Texas, had died at the age of 30. It was yesterday or the day before, and he was in otherwise optimal health, but you know, COVID attacks everyone differently. A new barrier I'm hearing, and I don't know if either of you guys have experienced this, or if anyone else has experienced this, please feel free to let us know. Is now restaurants, you know, obviously they're not handing out paper menus anymore because, well, you know, the contacting surfaces and stuff. If you go to do some indoor dining, which I thankfully don't plan on doing anytime soon, I don't get the difference between indoor and outdoor. I'll eat outside if I know it's safer. But for those who enjoy indoor dining and enjoy the ambiance, uh, you know, you're having situations now where they'll have QR codes, and you have to scan the QR code up on the wall or up on a glass case to go ahead and access the menu on your phone. Some folks who use VoiceOver are saying that although once you access the menu, it's accessible, scanning, getting a picture of the QR code is hard enough as a blind individual. And obviously, you don't want to ask some, you know, some other patron of the restaurant to help you out because, you know, on top of the layer of, you know, you just, you know, you want to have your own privatized experience at a restaurant, you're now getting in contact with anybody out there and you don't know who can be asymptomatic and infected. You know, I don't mean to be all paranoid on you guys and say don't talk to anyone, you don't know who has COVID, but at the same time, you know, people just want to go out to eat, not to go out to eat and take some COVID home with them as well. So you know, we have situations where restaurants have adjusted their voiceover was talking over me. That sounds fine, Mausam. We'll be here. Yes, I think the barrier is the accessibility of these QR codes, or in some cases, you have to go on the website of the restaurant to access the menu, and some websites are just inaccessible. So I don't want to sound like I'm complaining here or harking on an issue that's really minimal in ways, but at the same time, you know, we want to have a good restaurant experience, and they're, you know, they're evolutionizing their technology. I don't know if that's a word. Their technology
revolutionizing is the word for that.
No, I think I was looking more for the word evolve. Sorry.
Oh.
Evolving their technology to suit the times, you know, to suit the COVID situation. So I don't know, has anyone run into accessibility barriers going out to eat, or I don't know if we still have Ashar or others on, has any sighted individual gone into any restaurants and seen that the way menus are done is differently now to avoid contact?
You know, that's actually a good conversation that I need to have with a good friend of mine who I hope that we can have him on our podcast, because I know I can't speak for him mostly because, you know, him and I haven't had like a, you know, this type of conversation, or I haven't asked him, because he goes and, you know, follows, you know, social distancing guidelines. Like he's told me, you know, different times that he, you know, goes out to eat or goes out for walks and stuff like that, you know, and goes to, you know, restaurants and, you know, but you know, that's a good question that, you know, I could ask, just because I that actually didn't occur to me. So
yeah, you know, it's insane how things are changing, hopefully for the better, of course. I do think, you know, Mausam touched upon a point earlier that I just wanted to highlight again. Now, delivery apps, whether it's grocery delivery, food delivery, you know, Google Shopping or whatever you want to call it, have become so popularized for everyone. It's become so mainstream that, you know, not only now are they going to expand their platforms, but they're going to, make sure they work out any kinks that would have otherwise not been brought up. Because, I know like, the 66-year-old grandma who always goes to the local grocery store to pick up her produce is now obviously going to order them on, Amazon Prime or Whole Foods, on the website or Walmart because it's safer for her, right? And now you just have a whole new wave of folks. I know yesterday at the closing bell, Amazon stock closed at $3,200 per share flat, which is a great jump. It's a jump of about $1,200 per share in a matter of since this pandemic has began. So it's interesting to see these companies are taking off. Amazon and other tech companies, the NASDAQ just hit another record high, the NASDAQ composite, that is. And I think that's indicative of how, technology is going to change. Retail malls are already talking about converting themselves into apartment complexes to make more affordable housing accessible. People are already looking at Singapore's model because Singapore is always ahead of the times with their affordable housing projects that are proving beneficial so folks can afford to live in Singapore and have a decent apartment or house. So I think, the markets, the economy is going to evolve as a result of COVID. And I'm looking from a blind person's point of view for the better because technology has always proved itself, once we work out accessibility kinks here and there, to be greatly, greatly, greatly beneficial to the blind and, of course, to the sighted. I know everyone loves their technology. So I think we're only headed in the right direction in terms of consuming, in terms of the consumer culture.
Also,
I definitely agree with your concept of how technology has been evolving. Honestly, we've seen it all around us. We've been seeing more in-store shops closing down and more online shops opening up, and we're seeing all these different ways of how electronics have just been carrying the world so far, creating new apps to do other new functions for us ultimately, just to make our lives easier. And I just feel like, this whole COVID pandemic has just honestly accelerated some of the ways that technology could help us. And I don't know if you have any input on this, but how fast do you think technology could be evolving, and do you think people are honestly gonna continue living in this way, relying on technology in order to obviously go shopping rather than going back to the grocery markets and changing our lifestyle ultimately? Do you think it will affect us in that way? Do you think we'll ever be able to go back to the usual way of grocery shopping, or do you think that we will continue to rely on apps or technology to provide those services?
From my point of view, and given the research I've conducted, I think there are going to be three factors to play. Number one is going to be whether we have something like a second wave or a second shutdown, because as a result of the first shutdown and the reopening, we saw that wasn't as much of a case as we would have hoped it to be, because people still went back to in-store retail shopping. In-store, there are still people who are going to the malls. But if we have a second wave, I think that would solidify the likelihood of this. I'm not hoping for a second wave, but it seems that's possible, if not probable. I think the second thing is going to be, and I say this jokingly but seriously, it's also going to depend on how many rotten apples people get in the mail. Meaning, is the quality of the service going to decrease? When people order their groceries online, how many of the tomatoes are going to be spoiled? And I don't know the answer to that. Maybe the answer is 0, and maybe the answer is only once in a rare while. I know some people who have gotten packages that have been a little ripped or a little torn around the edges. And I don't know that that has anything to do with COVID or just a rushed delivery individual. And I think the third aspect is going to be how long this ultimately lasts. If it lasts long enough, and I don't know what long enough is, but if it lasts long enough to shift our patterns as a society collectively, then yes, I think technology will overtake. If we don't go to movie theaters for long enough, we're just going to get used to watching everything on Netflix and Hulu. There are drive-in cinemas that are coming back into fashion, the ones from the 50s and 60s. So the idea of the classic cinema experience, AMC theaters, Regal, those groups, is kind of sort of not as in demand as it was pre-COVID. I know it's the ultimate American experience to go to the movies, get some popcorn, soda, and do that. But I don't know that that's going to linger for long. I do have confidence, and I've spoken to some investors. They have confidence that restaurants are going to be around. Certain restaurants who have, debt obligations may fall apart. They're talking about Cheesecake Factory. Some folks are talking about Pizza Hut, Wendy's, subsidiaries. Some folks are talking about Burger King to a degree. But the idea of a restaurant is kind of a pillar of American life. So I don't know that that restaurants as the concept is going to go away, but gyms definitely seem like they may be going away because more folks are going to buy their own gym equipment and set up their own boutique VIP gym at their own house. We're going to have potentially the idea of coffee houses like Starbucks maybe decreasing traffic because people are realizing they can make their own iced coffee at home for 20 cents as opposed to a $5 coffee at Starbucks. The idea of bars, I don't know that people are going to want to go out and drink and catch COVID. So maybe people will just, buy their own cocktail sets and make their own alcoholic beverages at home. But, these are trends yet to be seen. But it's more likely than not that there will be some permanent effects.
Also, so I know of a business that will change, and that's the exporting and import businesses, like my mom's, for example. She goes in and out of the country via airplane, and stuff like that, and giving El Salvadorians from here in the DC, Maryland, DMV area, to El Salvador and back. Now that's changed because what they're doing now, and because I was wondering how they were going to change it, is everything is going to be shipped, using cargo. Like my sister and my mom are actually now finally aligning different ways of how to ship their, people's, materials and stuff like that to and from El Salvador. Also, it depends on, asking about the technology, and if, apps are going to, use technology. I guess it also depends on the people as well. How many people you can also, get to deliver, because, we see now, with Instacart and maybe sometimes Amazon, you need to have people who are willing to, travel to, to drop off packages and their groceries. Because if you don't have enough people, then a lot of the orders are going to get backed up. In turn, some of your groceries may or may not get bad. So I guess it also depends on people as well, not just technology.
Yes. Sorry, I was muted there for a second, and it took me a little while to find the unmute button. I think for me, I know I was actually having a conversation with my mother a few days ago about designing some sort of app, sort of like, I don't know, I guess we can call it the My Friend app, which is kind of like a boutique or VIP experience of something like Uber combined with Instacart, where it would be, this may be most beneficial to elderly folks or folks with children, where they can pair with a friend, with a pal. and that person can go with them to the grocery store if they can't drive or they don't drive or for any reason they don't have a car. Sort of like an Uber, but this is a person they always work with. So we can make a team of pals and a team of consumers or something, a team of customers. So something like that might become more desired because we were saying earlier, I don't want to hop in an Uber of someone I don't know, but if it's someone I know, I could feel more comfortable to honestly ask them, hey, have you been feeling sick recently? Something like that. I know that's private information, but at least you can ask someone you're more comfortable with. Or they can run the errands for you, but you've already sort of interviewed them and established that relationship, so they know how you like your tomatoes, or if you like your bananas green or yellow, or so you can get the optimal grocery experience. It would be more for a niche market, I think. It would be for folks who are willing to pay a little more and willing to have a personalized, privatized experience that doesn't necessarily come with modes like Uber or Instacart, where you don't necessarily meet the driver or the person who's delivering your groceries ahead of time. You just meet them the time of. So this is a more boutique idea, but I think it's something that can take off, particularly in this environment. So I think I just need to get in contact or find me a web developer who would know how to, or an app developer who would know how to design something like that, and obviously some startup venture capital or something like that. But that's an idea, and I don't know if someone on the interwebs now is going to hear that and take that, and if they do, all credit to them. But this is the opportunity to establish new things, new technology, whether it be in biomedical, whether it be in consumer goods, whether it be in other facets of the economy. I don't know if any of you guys have been exploring any pet projects or any ideas that you guys think now is the time to test out in COVID and may succeed.
Well, there's a certain someone that has kept me from trying said pet projects, so I'm not going to comment.
Look, we can work together. I'd be glad for us to work together and see what we can come up with. So I think there's a lot to be discussed. One thing that has happened as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, I guess, is the cancellation of big events. For example, we have the National Federation of the Blind National Convention that was to be held in Houston next week that now has gone virtual. So I don't know if anyone wants to speak to that or to their previous convention experiences. I've attended 2 national conventions so far, one in Orlando, Florida, and one in Las Vegas, Nevada. But this is going to be a virtual one, so it's going to be different. Any thoughts on whether y'all are going to like it virtually or not? I think there are the pros and the cons.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot of things that go into this. Obviously, we all love the experience of hanging out together. And honestly, a convention is like an experience, honestly, like no other. It's very hard to put words to it. Even to somebody who's been to one, it's almost indescribable. There's so many people, so many like-minded people. You're in a new city often. You just get to see and learn so many things from so many people. And I think that is indispensable, and also it's very hard to replicate that virtually. But the thing that gives me a lot of hope is that our federation is a pretty tight-knit group, and we call ourselves a family, and I think in a lot of cases that is very, very true. And ultimately, I think it's about the energy that you bring to it and the experience that you at least try to have. I know that they've put in hours and hours of work to try to make these sessions as interesting and informative as ever. I was looking at the agenda and I was blown away by all of the cool presentations, the informative presentations. They've packed a lot into this week. I think my fear and the fear of many of us was, well, if it's virtual, like, what are we going to do? Like, what are they going to, like, how can they possibly make the convention, which is such an in-person amazing experience. How are they going to make that virtual? But based on what I've seen so far, they've done a tremendously good job, and so I'm very excited.
So,
Mausam,
go ahead.
I know that you're part of your NAB secretary. So are there anything? Is there anything that NABs you'll find interesting that NABs will do virtually this year?
And NAB stands for the National Association of Blind Students. So Mausam is a student leader nationally for blind students. And if you want, Mausam, you could extend that to how you got involved in the student division, how you got involved in the federation.
Yeah, absolutely. Oscar, to answer your question, we have some really exciting events planned. Obviously, everything is going to be over Zoom, but we have made sure to bring in a lot of engaging speakers and to have kind of just a big aura of fun surrounding it, just to kind of ease that transition. So I am very confident that our students are going to have a great time. And even anyone else who just wants to drop in, I am very proud of NABS and all of the work we've put into it. And so I'm really excited. We are all very excited to share all of that with you next week at convention. But I guess the broader question then, how did I get involved in the Federation and NABS? So I think the beginning was probably summer of 2017. I went to my first regional student seminar. It was actually, at the time, it was Northeastern seminar, and that was at the Jernigan Institute. I had been to the building once before for an engineering camp, but this was the first weekend that I really got to network with students in the NFB, but also a larger sector of the NFB. I remember I got to meet President Riccobono, which was such a great honor. And it was a wonderful weekend. I had no idea about all of the resources that were offered and in place for students, and so I was honestly blown away. But after that seminar, I went to the Colorado Center for the Blind for their 2-month summer program. And honestly, I think that is what truly exposed me to all of the wonderful things that the NFB does give us. I learned so much. I can't even begin to describe how much I gained from that program. But coming out of that, I had a new perspective. I think I was much more ready to get involved, to grab the opportunities that were afforded to me. And so I started to get involved in some of the national committees. I think I started out in the membership committee, and I was excited. It was awesome. I was so fortunate to be able to kind of slide into that group dynamic and also just know that I was doing good work for NABS, but also students around the country as a whole. And then I guess July of 2018 was when I was elected to the National Association of Blind Students Board. And I think that's when it really, really started. I guess I truly began to understand the gravity of the work we were doing and just the impact that it made throughout all of our students. And I was, I guess, to reiterate, I was beyond excited at that point. I knew that this was a good time to kind of embrace those opportunities and to really hone my skills as a leader, because I think that's what involvement in these organizations give you. It's one of the most important things, in my opinion. It shapes you and it teaches you how to be the best person you can be. And so I have been very honored to serve on the board ever since. And I am looking forward to where the Federation and NABS will take all of us next.
So I want to start off, Mausam, by commending you. I've always had a high degree of respect for your leadership, your ability to bring folks in, to tell your story and connect. Because I guess the key skill to any leader is emotional intelligence. We think it's all about knowing how to articulate your thoughts, but no leader is born, a leader is made. And one of the things a leader needs to have is emotional intelligence, a high emotional IQ. And Mausam, you're one of those who's demonstrated that to such a high degree. So before I proceed, I did want to commend you on that. I know
Thank you
that.
so much.
Oh no, it's necessary to speak the truth when it's there. I know that for me, I had a leadership. I mean, I still have a leadership story. I don't want to put it in the past tense, but it sort of shifted. So I joined the National Federation of the Blind, and there are other organizations for and of the blind out there, but the National Federation of the Blind is the organization I primarily joined, and it's the largest and oldest organized movement of the blind by the blind. And so I actually kind of started out in a similar way. I've always known of the National Federation of the Blind. You hear of them being, you know, a blind youngster. Your teachers of the visually impaired, your teachers of blind students, bring them up. The National Federation of the Blind is an advocacy group that helps blind people live the lives they want. Right? You always heard that as a child, as a blind child, but I never really paid attention to who they were or what they were. And then I briefly attended one convention. I was 9 or 10 years old, and then some local leaders, great leaders, we had a great conversation with at the convention. We had them over for dinner a few nights later and talked about the federation and how I can get involved and how I can join. Admittedly, I kind of threw that on the back burner for a while, busy with school and school-related items. Then I think I went to blindness skills training at the Virginia Rehabilitation Center for the Blind and Vision Impaired in Richmond, Virginia, 2016, 2017. There's an episode that talks all about that for y'all who want to know that story. And it came up that the National Federation of the Blind holds meetings on their campus, or the National Federation of the Blind of Virginia Richmond chapter specifically, because we're divided into 52 affiliates for Virginia. For all states, plus Puerto Rico and DC, I think, is another affiliate. Yes, DC is. So we have 52 affiliates, and then within those affiliates, we have chapters. So that's just the structure of the federation. But anyway, the Richmond chapter had meetings every month, the fourth Monday of every month at like 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. And I remember one Monday I said I would join. I never got around to it. And then it sort of just fell off my schedule. There wasn't a burning passion, admittedly. Then I went to the youth blowout. It was the first weekend of June 2017. I went with some good friends up to Baltimore, and great friends of mine at the time I had connected with, like Mr. Robert Parsons and Mr. Mark Canamasso and other folks that are great friends of mine, and hopefully we can bring them on in future episodes because they have lots of different experiences to offer. But just sort of a little teaser for what's to come. I started meeting folks, and I saw this is a real movement. This is something, you could just get that feeling. So I was like, okay, sure, I should keep an eye out for these guys. Then in the summer of 2017, my family made some great travels, and I had stayed behind at the time for, because I had gotten a small summer job opportunity that I wanted to take advantage of. I went ahead and did that, and that was connected also to the National Federation of the Blind. And I'm sitting here thinking, wow, they are everywhere. They must be a very real and very organized movement. And I stayed a little late one evening after wrapping up work. We were packing up the room because it was the end of the program. We were teaching young kids Braille literacy, and it's called the BELL program. Braille Enrichment Learning and Literacy, I believe, is what it stands for. And we were, cleaning up and everything because it was the end of the program. And they said, "Hey, stay for our meeting tonight." So, okay, sure, why not? So I stayed. It was from 7 to 9, and they were preparing for a state convention here in the state of Virginia. And it was at the Westin Hotel, which is really not too far at all from my home, really close. So I said, okay, maybe the best way to get involved in this organization is to just throw myself out there and volunteer. And I of course didn't know what I would be getting, but I said, okay, childcare, sure, yeah, I'll do that, yeah, childcare, okay. So I agreed to coordinate that, not knowing what I was walking into, but it was the beginning of a journey. And, it went from there. I started getting involved in the Virginia Student Division, which is a subdivision of the National Student Division. Eventually, I was on I guess I was fundraising chair for a little while there. And then I had been nominated, and I accepted the nomination for vice president. I had taken that for a year. That was a great leadership opportunity. And then I sort of shifted. I started getting into affiliate work a little more, and, with college and everything. So I started, getting into affiliate work, moving away from student work, although I'd love to, lend a hand where I can. And I became a board member for the Potomac chapter of the National Federation of the Blind of Virginia, which encompasses Arlington and Eastern Fairfax County. And that was pretty much how that happened. And it's changed, it's evolved. My leadership has evolved, has grown, I've taken different positions. And I also got the opportunity to involve myself in different organizations as a result of the inspiration of growing as a leader and as a result of cultivating leadership skills. Opportunities also to really hone my skills as a person, as an individual. That's why great leadership books like Dare to Lead by Brene Brown, that's Brene with a B, and On Becoming a Leader by Warren Bennis are great books to read for any leader. I would also advise, I know this is a military strategy book, but it helps any leader, The Art of War by Sun Tzu, which is a very classic piece of literature when it comes to at least military studies. So that's my story in short. Of course, there are more details. There were ups and downs. All leaders make mistakes. All leaders learn from their mistakes, hopefully, and try to do better. But I think I'd be glad to have an episode where I talk about all those, because there are a bunch of those, some of which y'all know, some of which y'all don't. But but it's, that's kind of my story. I know, Oscar, you're a chapter president here in the state of Virginia for the National Federation of the Blind. So I don't know if you want to talk about your leadership journey.
Yeah, I'll also talk about it, and I'll also talk about how I myself got into the NFB. Because at the beginning, and Mausam, I don't want to offend your belief or anything, but because it was my opinion at the time. Obviously, with time, my opinion has changed. So at the beginning, and Naim, you can vouch for this as well, because you know how I viewed the NFB at the time. At the time, I didn't care about blindness movements and stuff like that, and I was like, it's not important. I can just cruise along as a blind individual. Just it was, my mentality was, it's me against the world. I don't need to involve other people into my personal life or professional life. But obviously, things change. With time. I think what changed for me was, when was it? I think it was at a summer event. Naim, I think you remember this event. Naim was telling me about, this picnic that some blind folks were, at the time I, viewed them as blind folks that were, were throwing at their house. And I was like, I'm like, it's good for me to know, get to know like other blind people, I guess. So, I'll just, I'll attend just for the sake of attending. So I did, and that's when I actually got to meet Tracy Sofranco, and he actually changed my view of the NFB. He was like, we actually help blind people achieve their goals with through different means. And what got me was, if things aren't accessible, or if you need help, boosting out, getting starting up a chapter and stuff like that, because I know that you live in Prince William. I don't know if you're interested in that, but it just takes one of us to help you out, and that's what changed my view. And since then, I helped start up the Prince William chapter, but then after a year and a half, it went inactive for a while. And again, my mood definitely changed because, school got my attention, and school was very stressful at the time. So I was like, I'll just put, NFB stuff to the side until I got a phone call from Sandy Halverson, and said, hey, we want the Prince William chapter to continue. So we need you, if you're willing, of course. And I stepped up. I'm like, okay, yeah, definitely, wherever I'm needed. So that talking to different people helped me, change my view about the NFB. So that's my story in a nutshell. Because again, like Naim, I have a lot of ups and downs. So, Naim, are you still there?
The glories of virtual.
Oh, I know, right?
Hi, I'm back. Can I be heard now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Sorry, I was just eating a muffin, so I had to mute myself.
No worries. You outed yourself now.
Well, I mean, it's that
Eat
good.
that muffin with pride.
It's that good. So, what are, I guess, there are different blindness stories, and I don't want to ask such a vague and sweeping question here. But what are our stories, or how would we like to frame our stories? Because here's the thing. I believe, to preface all this, the one thing that makes America beautiful, there are many things that do. These days, there are also things that we can fix if we truly confront them. Hashtag our history. But anyway, one thing that makes us such a together nation, such a caring and loving nation where we help each other out, is we always care to know everyone's story. And everyone has a story. Everyone has a point of view to offer. I had heard from Johan Hari on Joe Rogan's podcast. He had said that's not really a thing in Europe, where you're like, hey man, what's your story? You can't just sit down, plop yourself on a bench next to some random person, start telling your story or start asking them about theirs in Europe. I know I was able to do that a lot in Richmond, Virginia. I'd just be walking downtown, strike up a conversation with someone. Next thing you know, we're telling each other our stories, and it's really a good experience. Go get ourselves a thing of fries, maybe a large Coke, and just talk. And so I always like to ask folks, what is your story? Now, the reason I just bring up the word, blindness is because my story isn't my blindness. Dare I say it that way? For some, it may be. For others, it may have played a role, right? But my story, I'd like to think, well, I'll be naive to say would be the same if I were sighted. That's naive. But I'd like to think would be pretty much similar, pretty much the same if I were sighted. I don't say everything will be the same. I don't know that I would have met great folks like Mausam and Oscar. I may have, I don't know. But I think the question I pose here is, how do you view your story? And if you want to tell your story, what is your story? I don't know who wants to take it first.
We'll let Mausam take it first if she wants.
Oh, that's a heavy question. I love it. I think you brought up a really good point, Naim. I think that everybody's story is different, and people definitely view characteristics that affect their story in different ways and with different magnitudes. I would definitely agree with you also that I think in my case, my blindness has definitely played a role in my story, but it is not my entire story. And I think for many of us, it is that way. I think it's important to realize the opportunities and the connections that every characteristic about you brings about in your life. I know that I have met some wonderful people through my blindness. I've gone to events of the blind, events for the blind. I've been fortunate enough to serve in leadership positions within the blindness movement. And I think so many of those things have shaped me as a leader and as a person. And I think I may not have been able to find that type of opportunity anywhere else. It's hard to put words to it, honestly, because maybe type is not the right word, right? You can get leadership positions, you can get a life experience in so many different ways. But I think the one thing that stands out the most to me is the way I guess I really started to realize how we rally around one another. And I think for me, my blindness played a big role in showing me that. I think being a part of the NFB made me realize that there are so many like-minded people. There's so many people who have the drive and the passion to make the world a better place. And whether that's through advocacy, outreach, or even just telling stories just like this, I think it's such a wonderful opportunity for people to really get to know each other and to understand all of the different things that each of us is going through and all of the perspectives that we bring to the table. I think you guys would definitely agree that's one of the most important things. It's, you can't truly understand any type of situation or any event without having multiple perspectives on it. And I think all of us bring a very unique perspective to the table. Whether or not blindness plays a part in that, you come to that table with your own set of experiences, and that's kind of the lens that you view all of your life experiences and your events through. And I think that when I guess when we come together and realize that all of us view things through very different lenses, we get a brand new and very unique take on a lot of situations. And so, I guess this is a very, very long-winded way of saying that I think blindness has played a major role in my life. It's definitely not the only thing, but it has brought me some very, very interesting experiences that I'm so, so grateful to have had.
Yeah, I agree with you. Because my blindness and those who Naim and I posted our own stories on our lives, and my life, when I was blind, because as a young kid, my family would always talk for me, be there for me. I didn't have to lift a finger. However, what changed that was it just took one teacher. I had a vision teacher in 8th grade who told me having your family is great, but you want to be taken seriously. You want to be treated normally, not just the blind guy that got the job because he was blind, or the blind guy that can do this. If you want to be normal, you need to start like doing things the normal way. And that started off with self-advocating for myself. So just that one teacher actually helped me change my perspective on how just being blind doesn't have to mean I have people speak for me or do things for me. I can do them too, just as a normal person would. It would be maybe a different way, but the end goal is the same.
For me, I learned points of view. And I think that's everyone's life. They learn points of view, and points of view that may contradict their point of view. I guess we are born, or we grow up to form our own outlooks on life, our individual outlooks on life. But I really do believe it's others' points of view that end up meshing together to form your own. Everyone's opinion is a product of the opinions of all those around them, I guess. It's funny. You always find kids who are brought up in a household that are more Republican leaning end up being Republicans. Kids who are brought up in a household that are more Democratic leaning end up being Democrats. I think that applies to more than just politics. I think that applies to everything. We kind of get the ideas and the thoughts of our parents. And it's always funny because when we're teens, we always reject everything our parents do and say. I know we see that. I'm proud to be a Palestinian American. I come from a Palestinian household, and I come from a different generation than my parents. So there are things that I do differently than they do, or they do differently than I do. But I really do feel with much confidence that I will grow up to be my parents' spitting image. I I hope I take all the good qualities, right? But it just kind of happens that for me, I'm first generation, born and raised here in the United States. My parents are Palestinian born, and so they have slightly different points of view than I do. My mom came here at an earlier age than my father did. My mom came here around 1.5, 2 years old. My father came at age 26. So they came around at different times. So even their views are slightly different. But the point of the matter is, I think we all form our points of view as a product of everyone around us. I've also learned to view life in the light of what it is, regardless of whether I can see. I'll give you a simple example. Food. I can taste the colors of food, and that's no superpower. Anyone can. Go ahead and get something with a red sauce right now. Go ahead and get something with a tomato sauce, and you'll feel the redness. You'll feel the warmth, sometimes the fire if it's a hot red sauce, You will feel that, and you will know, hey, the color of this sauce is red. The color of this food is red. Go get a white bechamel sauce or a white cream, like an Alfredo sauce type of food. And you taste the smoothness, the slick uniformity of the white sauce. You can taste that it's white, if you will. Go get a sauce that is yellow, and you can taste the brightness, the luminosity of the yellow sauce. You can taste in the hollandaise sauce that it's got some brightness to it. It's got a pep in its step. Same with orange to a different degree. You taste not only the citrus of the orange sauces, but you taste the color, how it shoots out at you, And then the brown sauces are always thick and opaque and wholesome and dark and multi-layered, and it's hard to get through to the bottom of it. And then, of course, you find the fancy blackened chicken and blackened steaks. And those are, they taste black, they taste rough, they taste dark, So you can taste the food. And, blue and red are easy examples because, red, you taste the fire, blue, you taste the cold. But I think that applies to all colors on the Roy G. Biv spectrum and other colors. Like, it's pretty cool how you can consume life and consume all aspects of life, all senses, in whichever way you've made available to yourself, whichever scope, whichever purview you've opened the door to for yourself to consume and to benefit. My story, in short, is really simple. I never really noticed my blindness as a kid. It wasn't there, but I never denied it either. It was just a fact. It was never a defining characteristic. It was never a front and center. And that's how I always used to view it. Now, I wasn't really involved, like I said earlier, in the National Federation of the Blind. Then when I got to spend time with lots of National Federation of the Blind of Virginia leaders and the national leaders, I saw that, wait, there are many like-minded individuals in that regard. They can articulate it sort of how I'm articulating it. Everyone has their own story. Some people were blind at birth, congenitally, like myself. Others were blinded later in life. But the approach is, and it's a philosophical approach, but also, I guess, a life approach. And there are many different philosophies, I guess. And I don't like to use the word philosophy because it sounds all encompassing and it tries to force under one purview. But there are many different perspectives and points of view when it comes to blindness. But I think the universal one that I'm seeing amongst lots of folks in the Federation and around the Federation, and even outside of the Federation, but articulate the same feelings, such as myself when I was younger, is the idea that wherever they are in their stages, wherever they are in their process of blindness, they know that the end goal is, and if they haven't achieved it yet, they want to achieve it. The end goal is blindness just being there, being, I guess, a characteristic, but it's not going to define them. It may help them get better at problem solving. It may help them get better at methodological approaches. Not mythology, methodology. That's the word. It may be there, but it's never front and center, and it's never denied either. Hey, yes, I'm blind. Everyone has a slightly different approach, but I know for me, I didn't realize I was blind. Like, I realized, I'm not saying I didn't know I was walking around with a cane. I realized I was blind, but I didn't conceptualize the blindness as an important factor. It was just there. Yeah, I'm blind, but I'm also Palestinian American. More importantly, Palestinian American, in fact. I am also, a young person trying to fit in this world, in this society, and everyone has their place. So, yeah, I think there's a lot more to be said about my story, but that's really the theme that I took away and continue to take away from myself is, yeah, I'm blind. It's there. Whatever. Next. So I want to ask, I guess, for whomever wants to pick this up, what does, I guess, the National Federation of the Blind mean to you? I know that's a weird question, but I hope that can be answered. What does it mean to you, being a member, a leader, actively participating? If there's a way that can be summed up. Pardon.
I think it means a lot of things, and I think those things change from day to day, but also as you get older, as you have more life experience in your own life, and as you I guess as times change too, I think for me personally, I think a big part of it is that community. I think it's valuable. In fact, I would go as far as to say it's invaluable. I think that being in a position where you can surround yourself with people who are, again, so passionate, so driven to change the world in whichever way they can, and in a way that you can relate to, I think that's so important. I know as a student and as a young person still, although on some days I feel old, I really shouldn't say that because then people who are actually old will look at me and be like, stop complaining. But, I think something huge and monumental for me was being exposed to so many positive role models from a young age. And I think that is one of those opportunities that I wish every single person had, had access to and was able to have, because it changes your life. It changes your perception of yourself. It changes your idea of the things you can accomplish. And also it really helps to cement your place in the world. I know that all of us grew up in very different environments. Some of them were very supportive. Others maybe were a little more, what is the word I'm looking for? I guess a better way to describe it even would be that I think society's low expectations of blind people can make themselves very prevalent a lot. And I think all of us can agree that we've experienced that at least 40 times in our lives. Yeah. Maybe I should have picked a higher number. But I think with all of that said, being able to surround yourself with positive role models who have a good, and I totally feel you, Naim. I feel like the word philosophy is a little tricky, but I would even say who have a good perspective on blindness can really help you reach your full potential. And it's not just all about blindness. I think you articulated that extremely well also. They teach you that your blindness is a characteristic. It's not a characteristic that defines you, but they teach you how to really fully accept it and live the best life you possibly can. And that brings in every other characteristic that you have in your life. You know, if you want to go into business, like, or, you know, anything, honestly, like biology, what have you, how to be successful, how to problem solve, how to be confident, how to be a leader, all of these things, I think, really come from positive mentorship. And I think in the NFB, that is something that I've noticed is done exceptionally well. Is there's so many successful blind people. There's so many successful individuals, blindness aside. And I think we're so lucky to be able to know them, to talk to them, to call them our friends, right? You know, people make that joke all the time, like, oh my gosh, if I ever had a problem, I could call, you know, so and so, and they would answer, and they'd be with me in 2 minutes. And I think that's so accurate. You know, I think all of us could say we have somebody in the NFB who we could just call on speed dial, and they can help us work through whatever it is that we're struggling with. And so I'm very grateful for that. And I think, I guess the best way at that point that I could sum it up is that I so appreciate the community in the National Federation of the Blind.
Yeah, definitely. As I stated before, you know, if it wasn't for the NFB, I probably, you know, because the main problem that I had was because there was a time in my life that I couldn't even trust my own family, you know, with understanding me. So I had to find, you know, other, you know, blind individuals that could, you know, help me, you know, understand me, and, you know, help me achieve my goals. And, you know, the NFB, you know, played a huge role in that, because, you know, I do have a lot of mentors now, that, you know, I can talk to whenever I need help. You know, if it wasn't for them, you know, I probably would have still been unhappy with, you know, with my path right now in school. Because at the time, you know, when I was in Northern Virginia Community College, I was struggling. And if it wasn't for those connections, that network that I grew due to the NFB, I probably would have been stuck in school. Yeah, I probably would have, you know, failed and felt, you know, useless. Even though, you know, my family said, you know, you're never useless, and you always have us to talk to. But, you know, I need someone that knows what I'm going through, or what I have been through, to, you know, to help me, you know, keep moving forward. So yeah.
I think for me, and you touched on a really good point, Mausam, here, full acceptance. I think for me, this is why I also want to talk to other people. You know, obviously full acceptance also means having the resources available to you, having the access, having, you know, in some cases the network, but having the ability to say, hey, I'm a blind attorney and I know it. Hey, I'm a blind psychiatrist and I know it. Hey, I'm a blind astronaut and I know it. I'm pretty sure there are some great blind astronauts out there. I don't know anyone individually, but I'm pretty sure there are some. I do know there are some blind medical doctors for sure.
There's
But
blind astrophysicist, but I don't know anyone who's.
There's an astrophysicist. I think there's also a pilot or two. I always knew, I guess, because of my perspective, me being born blind, there was, and this is going to sound more cynical than I intended to sound, so you guys feel free to cut in if you feel a need. There was nothing for me to accept. What was there for me to accept? I mean, if I couldn't accept my blindness, then I couldn't accept the fact that I have dark brown hair or light brown eyes or an olive skin complexion. It's like I know others had different experiences, and I want to hear everyone's experiences. I never had that to grapple with. I never had that to tackle. You know, I had many identity crises being a teenager and a young adult. We can talk about those. But blindness just never ended up on my radar of of acceptance crises, of something I had to tackle. And I'm not saying that from an arrogant perspective. I'm not saying that from a pompous perspective. I have to humble myself because that was just given because I was congenitally blind, and other folks who are congenitally blind will disagree, I'm pretty sure. But being congenitally blind, it was like if I didn't accept that, then I didn't accept other aspects of me. So I always accepted it. It was a default, if you will. And I think why I say I have to humble myself is because in ways I didn't get the growing opportunity that folks who have to tackle with that acceptance battle, with that acceptance crisis, get. Because ultimately walking out of that, I guess, overcoming your story of acceptance makes you grow as a person, makes you grow as an individual and a character. And I think, there's so much. So I don't know if you guys would be willing. I'm always willing to be vulnerable and open. If either or both of you guys want to talk about what full acceptance looks like or looked like for you guys on your journeys individually as blind folks. For me, it was just a default.
I think for me, I would definitely echo your sentiment that I did also grow up blind. I was also congenitally blind, so in that sense, that hurdle, I am so grateful I didn't really have to jump. I think that it was just as you said, it just was what it was. I think where the distinction is, maybe we have to reframe acceptance, maybe to also encompass truly understanding what it is you are capable of. I was very fortunate to grow up in a wonderfully supportive public school environment, and I was pushed and I was challenged every day. My blindness didn't give me really a reason to not participate in extracurricular activities, to take challenging academic courses. And I'm so grateful for that, because I know that without those opportunities, without that encouragement from my educators, I might not have risen above any type of standard that anybody set. And so I was taught from an early age that, it's you who sets the high standards. Yes, society definitely play a role in everything we do, but ultimately we need to try to strive towards our own high standards. And the hard part is establishing those high standards. And if you aren't given the opportunity to do that, if you grow up with people telling you that you won't be able to do something, that you're not capable of something, generally your standards kind of shape around that. I think even looking back to something that Naim mentioned in this conversation as well, you are so influenced by what's around you. You're influenced by your parents, you're influenced by your peers, your teachers. All of the things they say to you, they lodge somewhere in your mind. You might not want to admit that, you might not want to think about it, but every single thing somebody's ever said to you has made some type of impact, no matter big or small. And I think that ultimately in the end helps you to shape your identity. And so I think for me, I think I grew up knowing that I was blind, fully accepting that I was blind, but not necessarily aware of what kinds of things and what kinds of doors that could open and what kinds of things I could do despite my blindness. I think when I first heard that there were doctors and astrophysicists, I truly, like, even to this day, sometimes I'm like, I have to check myself. I totally agree with you, Naim. That's one of those moments where you have to humble yourself. Sometimes I'm still like, what? There's no way. Because, growing up in a certain way, yes, you might have all the encouragement in the world, but then there's just some things that you write off as just plain impossible. And so it's just one of those jokes you make as a kid, like, haha, I want to be a pilot, LOL, I'm blind. But like, at what point is it that you realize that it's not a joke? Like, it's something you can actually do. And it's something that people in the NFB have done, people outside the NFB have done. And I think for me, the absolute mind blown moment was realizing that so many things that I thought were impossible are absolutely impossible. You just have to be able to find the right ways to do it. And some people know those ways, and our job is to learn from them and to expand our own perspectives.
All right, so I guess it's my turn to go. So, Mausam, if you don't know, my story is a little bit interesting. For those that watched the episode about me, you know, I wasn't born blind. However, I grew up blind due to the fact that when I was 4, due to uh, I still don't know the full story on this, but due to I don't know if it was because of malpractice or because of it just malfunctioned. You know, I lost my vision due to a neurological disorder, and with that came I don't know if due to that I lost my memories of seeing because I to this day I get a lot of when I bring that up, a lot of people assume, hey, you remember do you remember the color orange, or if you weren't born blind, so you know how to see. And I say no, due to so and so reason, I lost my memory and I don't remember. So my perspective has changed. I remember as a kid, I viewed it as, parents can shelter me all they want and I'm fine with it. But then as I grew up, you know, my viewpoint was, I'm in this by myself. I'm gonna walk this path. I'm gonna walk and navigate by myself. I don't need my family's help. Nothing. Like they don't understand what I'm going through or what I need to do to be successful. But that wasn't the case. I had to learn that the hard way. My mom has sat me down, I think individually, and she was like, I understand that you're blind and you have a lot of things going against you right now, but you don't have to go through this alone. Granted, I don't know what you're going through, but let me in. You don't have to. It's not you versus you against everyone. It's going to help you if you have people in your corner understand you to make your life easier. So that's my experience, and that's been my theme throughout this episode. That it was my viewpoint was it's me against the world. To I need to accept that I need help because everyone needs help sometimes, if not all the time.
I think, needless to say, we all have those times. We all have those moments where we're just frustrated. We want to slam the door, throw down the textbook, kick the laptop, um, uh, disrespectfully yell at someone because we feel like it's us against the world. And I'm not going to sit here and be naive and say there aren't any hurdles, there aren't any obstacles that the world has set up for us. But I think more times than not, when I have approached situations with the angry mentality, it has been more destructive, right? But I'll tell you where you can convert your anger into positive energy. I will tell you, Hope has 2 daughters. I heard this. Anger and courage. It is Hope that will be lifted up by its 2 daughters, anger and courage. You're going to have the anger at the situation you're in uh, because there is something wrong and there is something that needs to be acknowledged. And you're going to have the courage to defeat that problem, to overcome that obstacle, to kick that hurdle to the curb. Let me tell you a story that humbled me greatly. It was an experience I had. So, as a sophomore in high school, I was attending James W. Robinson Secondary School in Fairfax, Virginia. And for me, I wanted to participate in a culinary academy. I do enjoy the culinary arts. I know I was talking about sauces and different colors earlier. By the way, that colors theory has not worked for me in terms of food coloring and food dye on food. So it works with stuff that are genuinely yellow sauce, like hollandaise sauce, or white sauce, like bechamel sauce, or red sauce, like tomato sauce, and so on. But anyway, it doesn't work with like food coloring or charcoal. You know, charcoal's black, but it doesn't work with that in terms of tasting the blackness of charcoal. So I wanted to go to this culinary academy. I also wanted to get out of a situation. I talk about this in actually an Oscar's personal journey episode of being in to a degree, a segregated school. It was a regular high school, middle and high school, but the blind and vision impaired kids from all over the county were brought to that school because they had the largest staff of blind teachers of the blind and vision impaired, Braille transcribers, and so on. So they had their own little vision hall, which already put us at a social disadvantage. And so I wanted to get out of that situation, but more importantly for me, I wanted to go to this culinary academy. And I had what they call an IEP, which is basically an educational addendum that happens annually. And individualized educational plan, I believe is what it stands for. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. I suppose I'm right.
I think that I can do some research on that real quick.
All right. So I was doing this IEP, and the representative from the high school I wanted to go to, which was my base school, so the school I should have been entitled to go to in the first place in the public school system at Fairfax County Public Schools, my zip code 22182, so it applied to that high school, George C. Marshall High School. I went ahead and wanted to do that. So the representative from that high school was like, well, one, how are you going to have a gainful and wholesome experience in a culinary academy? You're a blind individual. So I'm already walking in to a situation where the pessimism and the cynicism and the negativity is there. I'm already walking into that room, right? And the gentleman furthers his argument. I wish I was an attorney because I could have quashed his argument nice and hard. He furthers his argument with, which I did, but without the legal credentials. He furthered his argument, but who's better than the person experiencing itself? I'm a primary source. Wow, I do lots of side notes, I just realized. He furthered his argument with the idea, hey, we're undergoing construction, so the hallway to get to the culinary academy is dark. We don't have lights in. A dark hallway. How will you navigate a dark hallway? Well, gee whiz, hun. I am totally blind, so dark hallways are my whole life, my friend. I have light perception. I tell when the lights are on or off, but that's as much as I can give you. So no, the dark hallway is not going to impact me in any way, shape, or form. Point of the matter is he was stuck in his ways. I articulated my arguments, but unfortunately to no avail because the team I had with me ended up subscribing to his arguments.
Naim, it's called the Individualized Education Program.
Okay, Individualized Education Program. All right. Great. Thank you. My team ended up subscribing to his thought process, to his argument. I don't want to say his ideology because I don't know that it is. And I was like, wow, so much for, if these guys were paid attorneys, I think I'd have a problem. But, so it ended up falling through. So I had to go back and I had to reconsider. I had to say, how can I make my argument stronger? And how can I make sure my team are willing to stand up with me on my argument? And I realized maybe I wasn't demonstrating enough what I am capable of. Or maybe I gave off this aura that I thought I was incapable of what I was trying to take on. Or maybe I gave off this aura that I was being more ambitious than I should. So I dedicated my whole junior year to proving my independence and my ability to do so. So much so I'd be showing up to classes with whole cakes baked just to tell everyone, hey, you guys want cake? So I made everyone in the school fat by the end of the year. All that to prove a point to myself. So next time you guys want me proving a point, I think you guys are going to get nice and full. So hang out around me at that time in my life again. I was baking and cooking and everything, and I took every opportunity while in class to take cooking courses and everything I can do. And then I said, let's go back to the drawing board and do this argument again. And this time I walked in and I laid out the law of the land. I laid out how it worked for me, what I've done, and what I've done to grow in this year span. And I articulated my arguments better, with more confidence, and with more hope. And it was that anger from the year before, from them making a mockery of me, and the courage to address that, to quash that, and to go ahead and earn what I wanted to earn, accomplish my goal, that gave me that hope. And what ultimately ended up happening is I got accepted. I applied for the academy. I got accepted into the academy. And I was doing that senior year, and that couldn't have been a better experience for me. Senior year of high school. And it was truly a humbling experience because I thought I could just walk in, say what I want, and get my will. No, that's not how it works around in real life. You've got to fight for what you want. You've got to have the confidence in what you want. You have got to go out there and say, this is what I want, this is how I'm going to get it, and I'm going to get it. And I think one thing a great friend of mine has pointed out as an acronym of OR, outcomes, agendas, roles, and rules. And what that means is first find out your outcome. I want to give credit to Mr. Jeremy Grandstaff. First, you have to point out your outcome. What is the outcome you want? In this case, I wanted to go to that culinary academy. Agenda. What is my agenda? Okay, my argument didn't work, so I need to improve my argument with solid evidence to substantiate my argument. Roles. How am I going to use my resources, my networks, and my team to support me in this argument? My team wasn't on board, so I had to prove to them that I can do this. And until I can prove to them convincingly and persuasively enough, I'll not have them on board. So I had to figure out which roles I wanted them playing. So I didn't want to shut them out, but I did want to let them know that I'm the leader. That's my role. Watch and learn, you know? And I went out there and set the rules. The rules were, I'm going to do this on my own merits, and I'm going to accomplish the goal I so desire, without finding slimy ways around it or without weak-handed arguments like the hallway's dark. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to use the strongest arguments and dispel and quash any ridiculous arguments that folks cough up or serve up. So I had to sit down and go with a roadmap, design a roadmap. Now, I did not know that acronym at the time, but I could already see how I had used that acronym to my advantage. So, you know, it's really a humbling experience, and we all are going to have our struggles. Do any of you guys want to share a particular instance where you had to overcome an obstacle, or you were humbled by an obstacle that got in your way, or anything along those lines?
Oh, Naim, I think that this should be the last portion of our segment, just because it's already 6:15-ish, and we have another podcast. Yeah,
we do have another podcast at 8 o'clock.
And I need to get some dinner.
You need to get something to eat. Food always comes first, right? Mausam, I know you wanted to leave around 5:15. I hope we didn't shoot your plans out of the water.
Oh, no, it's totally good. I got what I needed to taken care of, so I have unlimited time.
Well, it's always a pleasure sharing discourse with you.
Of course.
And
thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if there are any stories of perseverance, resilience that you'd like to share, or Oscar.
Oh my gosh.
I can go after Mausam as we've done throughout the episode. So
sure, I'll keep it brief. I feel like I could go on for hours about being frustrated about things, but I don't think that's necessarily the point, right? I think a lot of emotions come from challenging experiences. Let's see. I guess the one that I can think of that I don't know, to this day it sticks in the forefront of my mind, and I've spoken about this on some previous occasions just because I don't know, it was just one of those things where I truly kind of realized the nature of the beast. I was taking a course that I had mentioned previously. It was managerial accounting. But see, the thing is, there are two accounting prerequisites to even apply to the business school, not to get into the business school, but simply to apply to the business school. So the way it works at UVA is if you want to go to the business school, you apply in your second year, around the end of your first semester of your second year, and then you hear back in the spring, and you know, if you get in, awesome, great, you can declare that you are now a commerce major, and for the rest of your time at UVA you will be taking business courses. If you don't get in, you better have had a backup major, because at that point that's what you got to do, right? And so I, you know, was feeling very, very stressed throughout the first couple years, because it's a very systematic thing. There's quite a few prerequisites you need to take simply to apply to the business school, and often when you take those prereqs, you don't really leave room to take anything else. So I think, you know, a smaller sub difficulty of the entire situation is that you don't have time to declare another major because you didn't take any other classes. But I guess that's an entirely separate rant. But I was taking financial accounting in the fall of last year and managerial accounting in the spring. And both of these classes were entirely online, which from the outset wouldn't necessarily be a problem. However, they were using an extremely inaccessible platform that it was very hard to navigate with this screen reader. So what I ended up doing was spending hours and hours a week, up to 15, working with another student, and they would very, you know, graciously and kindly record all of my answers because I wasn't able to enter them into the system. So I was very grateful to be able to have that support. And, you know, I mean, what else were we going to do, right? Like it came down to that point where this was the best we could do. We couldn't reformat the entire system. But I think where I really began to struggle was just the inherent nature of the course. The fact that it was entirely online, not accessible in the least. I wasn't able to study on my own. I wasn't able to do my homework on my own. And I was frustrated as a blind person who is well aware that we are equally as capable as our sighted peers in the realm of academics, you know, given that we have the drive and the determination to succeed. I was frustrated. I didn't like the fact that I could not be independent in my coursework, and I brought this to the attention of my professors, and my professor was the same for both courses, and he was very aware of the accessibility challenges. But I think, honestly, I think I came to a point where I truly, really, I think a common theme is like really understanding and gaining an understanding of things. But I think at this point, late in the spring semester, I reached a point where I finally understood that there are some points and in life, and there's also just some people in life, and you know, just sometimes where no matter how many ways you explain something, it just isn't going to go through. And I think that one moment that my professor looked me square in the face after I told him that this class was inaccessible, and he said, well, I think you have the same access as every other student. You could have heard a pin drop. I was like, you're kidding, right? Like, you still think that, you know? And I think at that point, I had to make a very conscious choice to leave the blame at the door, right? You can point fingers as much as you want. We said this at the beginning of this episode, you know, regarding COVID. You can point as many fingers as you want, but at the end of the day, you just have to continue to move forward. And so I think that gave me a whole new appreciation for advocating for what I need, being aware of what I need, but also being aware of my limitations, because there comes a point where you can't push and fight the system anymore. You only have so much time in the world, right? These classes were an academic year, and that was it. I had to complete them. Otherwise, I wasn't going to be able to apply to my field of study. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It just had to be done. And so, you know, I think that was one of those times where I needed to put my pride aside. I needed to put my frustration aside, and I just had to accept that, yes, this situation absolutely sucks. I wish it could have been different. There's so many things that I would have done differently if I'd been given the opportunity. But at the end of the day, you make the best of it, and you make the best of what you have and what you can. And I guess the bright side of the entire situation was that I did finish the courses, and I luckily did get into business school. So while it sucked, I guess the effort was worth it.
Oscar,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
yeah, I know you have a
definitely.
nice.
So for me, so I went to a high school that again never came across a student who was blind ever. And from the begin from I knew it was gonna be an uphill battle. And you know again, I was surrounded by people that helped me, but life, my situations in my life changed with personal issues and other things. But what got to me finally, what ended up happening for me, like how I ended up coming to that reality, is my senior year. I guess we had an early IEP meeting or whatever it was to figure out what was going on, because there were some miscommunications over my junior year of high school. No one was happy um, with what I would, with my performance or whatever. And for those that listen to our podcast, it's the lit that that lit the fire in me conversation. But you know, it just, and here's the thing, I had to, like, I thought, why does my family, because, I was trying to keep my family at bay, because they were going through, my mom was going through some issue, health issues. My sister was going through some issues as well. So, I just held my family at bay. Anything that the school wanted, I just said, come to me. I can handle it. But it took that, again, people weren't happy with things that were done in my junior year, that it took that meeting in senior year. And, they were asking Oscar, they were telling me, Oscar, if you knew that this was going on, how come you didn't tell us? Or how come you didn't tell your parents? You're not in this alone. So, it just took one simple meeting of an hour to an hour and a half to finally get me to realize that, again, I'm not in a lot of things on my own. I have people if I just let them in. Because I could have just saved myself the hassle. A lot of things that, happened in my junior year, if we would have had that meeting earlier, or maybe at the end of junior year. It just, in my opinion, it didn't have to happen. I had to handle everything. I didn't want anyone else to know what was going on, but it, just one simple meeting, took that weight off my shoulders.
And sometimes that's just what it is, Sometimes it's just a simple conversation. I would like that to be the case all the time, but it sounds like in my case, and I think similarly in Mausam's case, the conversation at a certain point is just not going to go anywhere unless the dynamics of the conversation is turned or changed, and you take control, I take control, Mausam takes control of the conversation, and I think that's a lot of leadership also, is understanding how to shift the dynamics of a conversation into your hands, and make sure the ball is in your court. I know for me, it was a lot of got a nice Uber Eats notification, so dinner's calling me too. It was a lot of arrogance at first, a lot of pompousness, like I earlier said.
Yeah,
It was just
same here for me as well.
Yeah, and I think it's nice that we can admit that. For me, I just thought, I say what goes, and that's what goes, period. And I had to learn, no, you have to you have to demonstrate that this is what you need and this is what's going to be beneficial, because it's more than just, hey, this is what I want. There are resources on the line.
I have another example whenever you're finished, and then we can wrap up.
Yeah, there are resources on the line, and I think that's part of what is a leadership. So I think a nice closing activity, once, Oscar, you give your example and your point, is for all of us to share one leadership lesson we learned in our variety of capacities in leadership. So go ahead, Oscar. I know you have an example related to remembering there's more than just you on the line. There's resources, time,
Yeah,
and so on.
no, yeah, exactly. So my graduation again. I remember I had to fight a lot of people that weren't willing to budge about me crossing the stage on my own. And little by little, I'm gonna use a bowling reference. I was knocking each of those pins down, but there was that one huge, that one person that said, "I still don't believe you," or "I still don't believe in you," even though I've been there for 4 long years, 4 long years, and I was like, believe if you want, believe what you want. I'm crossing the stage by myself, and then that person was like, "No, you're crossing the stage with a guide," and you know, and I was telling my people, I'm like, "Hey, I can do this. So why isn't this one person not letting me or whatever?" And they were like, "Well, what do you need to do to show them?" I was like, "I don't know." So then I was thinking, and it so happened that I showed up to where the graduation ceremony was going to take place. I showed up 2 hours early, so like, fine, if this person thinks that I'm not going to be able to, then I'll practice this, and through that action, through several times of practice, learning how to cross that stage, I was able to show the little doubters that were left, that saying, "Hey, just because I'm blind doesn't mean I can't, do something as simple as cross the stage." So, yeah. Naim, you had one final activity before.
Yes. So, and I think that's just what it is. For me, I had a similar situation, but I was able to go ahead and walk the stage on my own for graduation by simply informing them. This is the new school I went to, George C. Marshall High School. Simply informing them, remember why I'm here. Remember why I'm here. I transferred here for the Culinary Academy. That was a battle I was willing to fight and win. And I'm willing to fight this battle and win it. So I earned the respect. I had to earn it. It doesn't just come. Leadership lessons. I guess for me, the biggest leadership lesson I learned being a leader in different capacities is being a leader. You always feel like you want to show you got everything under control. You want to show that you got it all figured out. You want to show that you're all put together. And that's not arrogance as much as that's just a leader being put together and confident and secure in their roots and everything. However, we're all human. And I learned as a leader, it's okay at appropriate times to let your guard down and be vulnerable. Have control over your vulnerability. Make sure the ball always remains in your court. You want to be a good fighter, but you can't always be a wolf. Because sometimes we're all sheep, And I know that metaphor is weak, but what I'm trying to say is we all
No,
have our
I
vulnerabilities.
understand. I
Yeah.
understand it.
We all have our vulnerabilities. We all have our weak spots. Be human. And if it fits appropriately into the context, or you can delegate or designate another leader to complement you well on a task, maybe in a committee or on a research project or throughout an investigation, then do that. If you know that maybe my weakness is I get too friendly with colleagues, with fellow committee members. So I want to have another committee chair or co-chair working with me who is the serious type, who brings us back onto topic, who brings us and focus us back onto our goals, like Oscar, and does a great job at, keeping me in line. So know your strengths and weaknesses and use your weaknesses as strengths or to strengthen your team. Use your weaknesses to your advantage. Have control over your weaknesses. Don't keep on denying them, because we're all humans. We're all people. And, we all have that sense of vulnerability. And I want to say in my closing statement here, we're not against the sighted world. For folks who thought, oh my gosh, you're talking about us against them and it sounds like a bitter warfare. No, we just want to educate, and we understand that we're in the best position to do so because we're experiencing blindness on a daily basis. And some folks, with all due respect, are kindly ignorant. And we just got to educate and inform them. And it's never an us against them narrative, but it feels that way sometimes when folks just don't want to learn. And when they just don't want to learn, it's okay. You do as the southern little phrase goes, you just say, bless your heart, son, and you move along. Because there's not much you can do if folks don't want to allow their ignorance to be pierced or dismantled. But education is the key word here from me. I would like to pass it over to either Mausam or Oscar. Leadership lessons and closing statements.
Alrighty. Well, I absolutely loved your examples. There were a couple things you said that I actually just really wanted to write down. Let me recall one of them really quick. I was ready to fight that battle and win. That's like a stellar philosophy right there. And at this point, I will use the word philosophy because I think that's a philosophy and I love it. So for me, leadership lessons, I think you, Naim, touched on yet again another really good point about knowing your strengths and knowing your weaknesses, and also acknowledging that you're not entirely always going to have it together. And I think based on that, I think one thing that I deeply learned that unfortunately, I think you just honestly need life experience to learn is that integrity and accountability are so important, and sometimes the way you gain that is by not having it in the first place and then someone pointing it out to you, and then you think about it, you go over your reactions and you grow from that. I would say that I had been pretty successful in the past years, and I'd been achieving all of my goals, I'd been reaching my standards, and I was flying pretty high, to really like put that and like extend that to, I guess, the broad horizon. But again, a common theme that we've brought up already is like sometimes you really need to humble yourself, because I experienced a time where I was a leader. I was responsible for several initiatives, and I had people who were working with me, and I let them down. I dropped the ball. I wasn't present. I didn't communicate. And the thing is, there's only so long that you can do that and hide it, right? There's only so long that you can hide behind your cover and your facade of having it together and just say, oh, I had a bad day, because at a certain point you have so many bad days that you have like a bad 2 months, and that's when people start to notice. That's when people start to talk about it. And honestly, that's when your credibility is in question. And I think something that's extremely important about being a leader is having credibility. And, for people to know that they can trust you and that you are responsible. And the moment that is called into question, you really need to reevaluate and start thinking about what it is that you can do better. And so I would say for me, it was a hard lesson to learn, the fact that I was approached by people at the end, and they told me everything I was doing wrong. They basically, it was a board of criticisms. It was this, and this, and I felt destroyed. I mean, I can't think of any other word. I felt absolutely destroyed. And in that moment, it was so easy to get defensive. There were so many responses that I had in my head. Well, I didn't do this because of this. It was really hard because of this. Well, I'm sorry because of this. But at the end of the day, it's not about that, right? It's not about all of the responses you can manufacture. It's not about how quickly you can get defensive. It's not about covering your butt, because sometimes you really have to acknowledge that you made a mistake, and being vulnerable, as Naim said, is so important in that moment. Being vulnerable and showing your committee, your group, that you understand that you have made an error, that you're trying to learn from it. It makes you a more credible leader. It helps you to grow, and it also shows them that you are willing to take into account what they say, that what they say matters, and that you have their best interest at heart. Because the moment you start being selfish and making it all about you, that's when you lose that trust and that credibility. And so I would say I'm very fortunate to have learned that lesson. I wish I didn't in the way I did, but I think, as with most things, you learn so much from life experience. And so, I guess with that being said, I would say that my closing statement is that, to echo what Naim said, I think that blindness has so many perspectives, it has so many nuances, and many of those, they're I would say they're a little alien to those who are sighted. And I think that honestly applies to everything, right? That applies to every different characteristic and experience in life. I can safely say that I don't know everything about everybody. I'm far from it. And so I think that all of us are in the pursuit of knowledge. I think that we can all learn from each other. And yes, there are going to be times where we might do the ignorant thing. I know I have done some very ignorant things towards groups that I'm not a part of. And I used to always think that because I'm blind, I somehow have the monopoly on diversity, right? You think that just because you have this characteristic, you will never ever do anything wrong. But that is absolutely untrue. And I think we have to learn that lesson, and so does everyone else. And I think at the end of the day, once we all start to understand that, it is going to be such a good world.
I know you don't want me to do this, Oscar, but I'm gonna have to steamroll you for 30 seconds.
30 seconds, go.
All right. I wanted to touch upon two things you pointed out, Mausam. I don't think anyone should be walking into a battle they don't intend on winning. You have to intend on winning your battle to walk into it. And secondly, for me, it was also I had to learn which leadership style works for me. The reason I sort of took a step back from student leadership within the National Federation of the Blind is I realized I have a greater, deeper passion, and I feel like I can give and gain more through affiliate leadership, but that's just because of my personality and because of who I am, and because I started finding myself getting knee deep in the politics of student leadership. And I don't mean politics in the literal political sense as much as every leadership style has its politics and has its chessboard to play. And I just realized for me, I am the type of guy, type of leader who's always willing to be a leader, but likes to do those focused, narrow, 9 to 5 leadership type roles. And I found more of those opportunities in affiliate leadership. And I don't think that's right or wrong as much as that's what leadership style fits me. And I had to make that decision because I dropped the ball one too many times when I was a student leader. And it was just because maybe the motivation or the leadership style just wasn't there for me. And I'm willing to admit that that was a major weakness of my student leadership that just wasn't correcting itself as much as I worked on it. And I had to realize, hey, this isn't working for me. This style is not for me. I have to find a different style. And just by chance and coincidence, around the same time, I got the opportunity to join a chapter leadership institute, which helps with affiliate leadership. And I definitely found affiliate leadership opportunities there, which worked much better for me. I violated the 30-second rule, but that's another weakness of mine. It's going long-winded. So go ahead, Oscar. And thank you, Mausam, for raising points that really stand true to me. Thank you.
Well, this is I can't, you guys actually both of you have really good points. So the takeaway for me is just because you're a leader doesn't mean you have to do it all yourself. Don't be afraid to, have other people help you. Maybe, spread the work out a little more than,
find
just
their strengths, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, have them help you so that way you can become even better. Because if you don't, then, you're going to be stressed out. The people that, the group that, you're in charge of or working with will be stressed out and upset. So just don't be afraid to give assignments or, give them like tasks, even if it's like the smallest task. Because from that you can learn yourself what you can do better, not just what the people you're surrounded with can do better, but what you can do better as well. So yeah. All right. Before we finish off, Mausam, do you have any social media platforms you feel comfortable disclosing where people can find you, either Facebook, Twitter, email, so on and so forth?
Or if you'd like, you could even pass on how people can get in contact with the National Association of Blind Students, or give us some convention messages or teasers, whatever you'd like.
Sure, I will just do both. So to get in contact with the National Association of Blind Students, you can visit www.nabslink.org. We have a lot of information on our website, including how to get involved with the committees if that's something you want to do. And we are also on Facebook. We have a Facebook group and also a Facebook page. It is at nabslink on Twitter, and also nabslink on Instagram if you want to get involved that way. And for myself, I guess pretty self-explanatory. My name is Mausam Mehta. You can find me on Facebook. I guess I could plug my Instagram. It's Mausam_M5. It is exciting, I guess. Maybe not, though. I've been taking a lot of quarantine photos, so that's probably not exciting. And I am so looking forward to our virtual convention. I hope to see so many people there. Even if you're not a student, totally come by the student events. We have 3. They are listed in the agenda. If I try to say all the times now, I'm inevitably going to mess something up. But we have 3 wonderful and exciting events, and so we would love to have all and every one of you. And yeah, thank you.
And Mausam, if you please, just because I have to put, links in the description, if you don't mind texting me all those links.
Yeah, no worries. Sorry, I said them really quickly.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's just I tend, because I'm the one that posts the stuff on YouTube, and I hate adding in links just because it's so much work. But anyways, Naim, where can people find you?
All right, so I don't take much of a social media approach because I feel everything on social media is soundbite or clip worthy. I like to have full, drawn out intellectual conversations with folks. So I would love to share discourse with folks via email. Feel free to reach out to me via email at NM, that's NM like New Mexico, Abulhawa, which is my last name. So that'll be spelled A-B as in boy, U, ELHAWA@gmail.com. Once again, that's NM, like the abbreviations for New Mexico, ABUELHAWA@gmail.com. And for those who are curious, the reason my email address is that way is I'm Naim Muawiyah Abul Hawa, and I hold great pride in my full name, indicative of my cultural background. So just thought I'd point that out there. So let's share discourse. Shoot me an email, and we'll go on forever and ever, hopefully.
I'm Oscar Montiel. You can find me on Twitter at OscarJMontiel37, YouTube, Oscar Josue Montiel, Facebook as well. Please subscribe to the No Nonsense podcast channel. Again, we post things 3 to 4 times a week. So as we were mentioning earlier today, there is another episode to be that we'll be posting. Actually, we got to post up 3 episodes because we didn't post the last one. But anyways, this was the No Nonsense podcast, guys. Thank you guys for listening and tuning in. See you guys next time.
Thank you, guys.